back. So this is officially episode 1. My name is Ashley and I'm going to be walking you through the basics of gardening. We are going to be talking with Whitney Kopchak. She is a wife and owner-operator of TWK Farms, and she's had a successful garden for the past couple of years and does all of her own canning, and also has some backyard poultry as well as some other commodities. So we're going to be talking quite a bit with her. She has agreed to walk us through her gardening process from start to finish. She has a couple of raised beds as well as an in-ground garden, and she is going to walk us through that whole process as well as starting from seeds. So we are going to be talking with her today quite a bit and quite a lot throughout this entire gardening series. Today we're just going to kind of go through the basics and help you get started, what you should be doing right now, how you should be preparing, what are some things that you should be looking for and planning for when it comes to starting your own garden. Okay, so are you ready to get started? So step 1 is your garden placement. So site it. Before you even start a garden, you need to figure out what exactly you want. So a lot of times when people think of a garden, they think of a really large space that they need that's going to take up a lot of time, and that's not always the case. Yes, they do require work, so if you think you're just going to throw some seeds in the ground and walk away from it, the series is not for you. But good luck! Where you put your garden is important. Place it where you're going to see it every single day. This is going to help keep you motivated. This is also going to help you be aware of what's going on with your garden. So if you know that there's some weeds growing and you can see them every single day, then you know you need to go down and kind of pull those out.
A really important part of planning your garden is picking a location for it. So we are fortunate to live rurally, and we do have some acreage. My garden is a little bit bigger than I would say what the average garden is for people. But this just gives you an example of what you can have. You do not need a huge backyard. You can have a small backyard in your, urban setting, and that just decreases the amount of, grass you have to mow in your backyard. So this space behind me is the main in-ground garden. It goes from where I'm standing clear to that electric fence. We do a tilling system every spring to till up the soil. We are fortunate to have a neighbor who can do that for us. So if you are rural, you can ask around. I'm sure somebody knows somebody that has a garden tiller that can help you. Or you can rent them from local places to have out. I know a lot of times you'll see on Facebook in the spring people advertising that they'll come till your garden for you for a small fee. So we till every spring. One of my favorite parts about that is I remember playing in the freshly tilled garden as a kid, and my kids have already asked, when are we tilling the garden so we can run in the soil? So I think that that's a good option. Some other options, if you live in more of an urban setting, there are raised beds. You can do container gardening. So in this series, we're going to talk about both of those. We're going to show you both of those. I live rural, so that'll be that setting. Ashley lives urban, and so we're going to be gardening there too with different types of containers. It'll be different expenses involved both places too. I think Ashley's trying to do her containers, the cheapest way possible, but with the best quality. We have some really awesome wood resources, so I've spent some money on building raised beds that we'll show you here in a minute. So some things that you can use for containers. This is just a galvanized bucket that we drilled holes in the bottom for drainage. Whatever container you use, make sure that there are holes in it for drainage. You don't want your plants come May when it's raining or June when it's raining forever to be waterlogged, because you will kill them. So just make sure that no matter what kind of container you have, there's some type of drainage in it. If you are planting in a container that's really tall, like this, these are just old buckets we got from when we bought some plants at a greenhouse. Say you're planting just a tomato plant in this. You can fill it with some plastic water bottles, the plastic containers that your seedlings come in. Put a small layer in the bottom to save on some dirt and to really help with your drainage, which we'll get into that more as we start planting, but that's something to think about, because potting soil and gardening soil can be expensive. Another really cool option that we added last year to our garden, just as an experiment, were these grow bags. So they came from Amazon. I think they were a set of 4. They have the drainage holes that we've talked about. And so I planted potatoes in these. I started my potatoes in the bottom. As the plants started to grow, I just kept adding soil and adding soil. And these worked really well. So these can work on a patio garden. You know, you can put them right outside your back door and plant all kinds of different things. So we'll show you that more with Ashley's too. But I would definitely start thinking now of where you're going to plant your garden and go and look at the sun. How much sun do you get during the day? Is there something that shades it for a portion? Because most garden vegetables need full sun. We do have a barn here beside ours, but by 9 o'clock in the morning, the sun is up high enough that it has killed the dew and all of that stuff, so it doesn't really impact our growing abilities. However, this tree back here, we have cut this tree down 3 times, and it just grows back, so it's on the project list again. And so last year I planted my cucumbers right in front of that tree, not really thinking about it, and it took them forever to grow and produce anything. And I really think it was because that tree provided so much shade for those cucumbers and they just weren't thriving. And so that puny little tree will be cut down again. I don't know what kind of tree it is, but quite the grower. But that's something to think about.
Pay attention to where the sun hits your yard. And follow it throughout the day. So you're going to want to choose a spot that gets a lot of sunlight. Most edible plants such as vegetables, fruits, and herbs require at least 6 hours of sunlight. So that's something that you need to be thinking about when it comes to placing your garden. You obviously don't want to place it under a bunch of trees where there's not going to be a whole lot of sunlight and there's really shady.
Also, think about your water source. There's nothing worse than dragging hoses for hundreds of feet to water, carrying buckets, carrying watering cans. We just added water closer to the garden, so I'm excited for that. I feel like I'll water better because it's closer, but think of that. Think of how close it is to your house. If you have little kids and they're napping, are you able to go check your garden? Are you able to go, pull some weeds? You want it easily accessible so you can be out there harvesting, you can be out there looking at it, because you're gonna need to be present in your garden. Is there a spot in your yard where the deer frequent? Is there squirrels heavily in an area? Just kind of think of that as you plan. We have to deal with our chickens. So there's one back here right now. In the winter, they are allowed to come out here. In the early spring, before we plant, they're allowed to come out here. But once seeds go in the ground, they go on lockdown. They're great before things get planted, but they can do some massive damage after things are done. So those are all things to think about. Location, the sun, how does that soil drain? How close is it to water? Is it convenient for you to get to? But just things to think about when you're planting your garden.
The other thing you need to think about is raised beds. So this is another really great one that you can do if you don't have a whole lot of space for an in-ground garden. Raised beds are a great one too. And try to figure out if you think a raised bed is going to be more beneficial or easier for you. So just something else to think about.
So this is a raised bed that I built last year. We were lucky enough to get some lumber. And so I just started sketching these out and then adding potting soil as they dump pots out. Raised beds are really popular options right now. I think they're great, especially if you're an older gardener. It's not as laborsome to bend over and pull weeds. You can kind of control them a little bit. If you are planting raised beds, think about the width. You want to be able to reach all of your plants. You don't want to go super wide. And you still want to put really good soil in. I would recommend putting some cardboard or newspapers on the bottom to cover the grass before you dump your potting soil or your topsoil or that. They're very popular. I'm going to try some root vegetables in mine this year to see how well they do. But there's lots of different options out there for raised beds.
Step 2, it starts from the bottom. This one is really important. Like with most things, you build from the bottom up. So why not make sure your soil is in great health? Soil testing is a great way to see where your soil stands and what it needs to be successful. To see how to test your soil, you can see our instructional video, which is kind of visit our YouTube channel and you'll definitely be able to find it. Or if you need any more details or if you have questions about it, you can always contact us. That's our phone number. We're happy to help you through it. Step 3, consider a container garden. So this is the one for my people who maybe don't have a whole lot of room for a nice sized garden, but guess what? There are alternatives. Consider a container garden. There's so many plants that do really well in pots and other containers, like vegetables and herbs and things like that. I'm going to be doing a container garden with you guys. So this is the first time that I've ever done a container garden. So this is going to be a learning experience for me as well. And I'm going to walk you guys through it, and hopefully together we can all kind of figure it out. Okay, step 4, choose your plants or seeds. So I know you're probably thinking already like, wow, this is so overwhelming. I don't know where to go from here. I don't know where to start. You need to start thinking about what plants or seeds you want to plant. If you're starting your garden from seeds, you need to be thinking about that like yesterday.
All right, when it comes time to planting your garden, I would say the first step is to make a list of the vegetables and fruits that you plan on growing. And then after you make a list of everything, I would go through and prioritize like your most crucial ones and the ones that, okay, we might be able to skip this year. Depending on your gardening and growing space, you might not have room for all of them, your first year. And you just kind of want to prioritize. Maybe pick some easier varieties at the beginning, and then as you get a little more comfortable, you can add in some extra things. So after you make a list of the vegetables and fruits that you want to grow and you prioritize the most important with the ones that could be eliminated this year, start doing some research to figure out if you just want to grow some for fresh eating in the summer, or if you want to grow enough to preserve to help sustain your family throughout the year. There are some really great resources online. You can check Pinterest, you can just Google it. One of my favorite books is The Family Garden Plan by Melissa K. Norris. So this chart walks you through how much you need to plant per person in your family for a year's worth of food. So one of my family's favorite vegetables are beans, like green beans. So we plant the bush style green beans. So we need 15 to 20 plants per person. And so it's me and my husband, and then we have 2 little kids. So I say that we are just a family of 3 because the 2 kids don't eat enough to count as a person. So we need 15 to 20 plants per person. So that it just gives you a really good breakdown of how much you need for any variety pretty much. So I just have a really rough layout of kind of where I think I want my plants to be, and then I will go through one of my garden planning books again and kind of plan like what plants are really good together, which ones should not be planted next to each other, and there's different charts. So then I can erase them and kind of move them how I want. You can also look into succession planting, so like my peas will be done in mid-June, and if I take those out, then there's still enough time and enough space to plant my green beans there. So you can kind of work through those things using different resources online, using books. I know that most of these books that I have are available at the Muskingum County Library, so that's a great source.
Obviously, you need to think about some of the plants that you're going to be, that you want to plant. You need to be thinking about your climate, your growing conditions, and your frost dates. Those are all things that are really important. Know where you are. So here in Ohio, it's probably not a good idea to try to grow bananas in your backyard.
So I think when most people think of a garden, they think of tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, zucchini or different types of squashes, green beans, corn. And those are all fairly easy to grow, pretty maintenance free. You might have to tie your tomato plants up and that kind of stuff. But they grow very well in this climate. We are fortunate in southeastern Ohio to have a longer summer with a longer growing season. We get the heat that some varieties need, but we also have a decent spring and fall that kind of cools off for other varieties. So those I think are the most common vegetables that people think of in a garden. Broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage do well here. Brussels sprouts I grew for the first time last year. They were very easy. They are a long growing season, so you plant them at the normal time and then you won't harvest them until your first fall frost. They do better after they've been through a frost. So they were pretty simple to just put in the garden and leave. Just check for cabbage worms and cabbage moths, but they did very well as well. Potatoes and onions have grown here very well also.
Do not doom yourself before getting started. Step 5, know your frost dates and climate. Make sure you know your frost dates. Don't make the mistake of planting too early or too late, because both are going to end badly. Take a look at your past year's frost dates and base your planting and harvesting off of that. Obviously, if you plant too early and your plants get frosted, they're not going to germinate properly and you're not going to have a successful garden. This goes both ways. Make sure you're harvesting before that frost comes through. Otherwise, those vegetables that you're harvesting are not going to be any good, if there's any worth even harvesting at all. So just make sure that you have that basics down.
So something I've learned a lot about in the past year researching different gardening techniques is that you don't have to have just a summer garden. And we are a little fortunate here in southeastern Ohio that we can do what is called like a spring garden, a summer garden, and a fall garden. It just depends on your first frost date and your last frost date. So that's something that you can just Google. And then once you know it, there's some different planning tools that you can use to help you extend your season a little bit. So that's something I'm going to experiment with this year, is planting some cooler weather crops a little bit earlier so that they're done and out of the garden come the heat of the summer, when they typically don't do as well. So this is a resource that I really like. Okay, so this is called the Clyde's Garden Planner. I found it on Amazon. It was, I'm pretty sure, like $2. So this little red line is your average last spring frost date. For Zanesville, that Ohio, is May 7th. So you just slide that little red line over, and then on the left here it tells you the main categories of vegetables, and then it tells you when you should start them for seeds indoors, when you can plant them outside, and when you can direct sow them outside. And then it also will tell you when you can expect to be harvesting those. And there's some other features on here that I haven't explored, but those are the main ones that I have used so far.
Okay, step 6, get your materials ahead of time. So you've decided your location, you've tested your soil, you've chosen your plants or seeds. It's time to get into the nitty-gritty. Get your materials ahead of time so you have ample time to plan your garden. Failure to plan is planning to fail. Think about if you decided on raised beds or a container. Do you need fencing around your garden? Do you have a pest issue? Do you need to add fertilizer or other supplements to your soil to reach those nutrient requirements?
Okay, so some of the supplies you might need if you were going to start your own seeds are some containers. So you can get containers just about anywhere. You can get really creative with it. You can use like old egg cartons, but once you plant your seeds and they start to grow, you might need to cover them to kind of hold in some of that moisture. So I did get these from Amazon. There are some varieties that I don't plan on planting a lot of, so I like that they only hold 12. Then I also, there are some other trays that don't, a little more simple. Unless you have a really good south-facing window in your house, you will probably need some type of grow light. I purchased mine from Amazon for like $30. They're very just simple, that have zip ties and like some rubber taping that goes on them to hold them up. If you don't use a grow light and they don't have a really strong source of light, your plants will get really leggy, which just means they're very tall and weak, and they won't typically survive. I had that happen last year where they looked really great and they got tall and leggy and then they died before I got to plant them. So if you have a really good window with south-facing light, you should be okay. But if not, you can get some grow lights. You can also use shop lights, which are pretty inexpensive, from Walmart, Rural King, those kind of places. You will need some type of potting soil. It does not have to be seed starting soil. The one thing you don't want to do is just take soil from outside your house, like in your garden. You want, I'm going to say, clean dirt, something that doesn't have any, pests in it, any chemicals that have been in it before, because you're starting plants, so they're going to be baby, they're going to need to be babied, so you want something really healthy for them. So some type of potting soil, it doesn't have to be seed starting soil. And then you're also going to need your seeds. These are things that you can get at the Dollar Tree, you can get them Walmart, Lowe's, all those places you can order them online. If you are ordering online, I have noticed that a lot of places are starting to sell out, but I have seen the varieties in stores as well. So just get your seeds, and then make sure the packets that you get do have directions on the back of them on when and how to plant those. And then you'll need some type of like spray bottle to water them. You'll want to keep the soil pretty moist. Some seed starting trays you can water from the bottom up, so water can sit in the bottom part of the tray. So you will pour the water in here, and then you can sit in here and it'll kind of absorb the water up through the bottom. That works, or you can just take a spray bottle and spray them. If your house is a little chillier, you might want to get a heat mat to set them on. The room I plan on growing in is where our furnace is, and so it stays about 70 degrees. Sometimes it fluctuates a little bit when the furnace does kick on, but you want the plants to kind of be warm in that setting. So those are some of the basics for seed starting. I think it's pretty easy. There's some kits that you can buy as well, but it's a pretty easy process. If you are a first-time gardener, or even in your early gardening years, I think it is very appropriate, and don't feel ashamed to go and buy your seedlings at a greenhouse or from your farmer's market. Try to support local if you can. There's some great options here in Muskingum County for local greenhouses. This is my 8th year having a garden on my own. I've also helped my parents garden since as little as I can remember. I took gardening in 4-H, and this is really the first year that I've even had enough nerve to try starting my seeds. Our garden is growing, so the expense to buy the seeds is increasing, but if you're starting small, seedlings cost, $2 or $3 depending on where you get them, and I think it can take out some of the planning. It's a lot easier. You can get your garden set up in the spring, and that way when it's time to plant, it's a quick trip on a Saturday to the farmer's market or to your local greenhouse. And those people are also very knowledgeable and can help you pick a good variety. You can read the cards that come with them, like do they need full sun, do they need partial sun, what tomato variety is good for canning, what one is good for slicing. So all of that information is there, and it's not as overwhelming as sorting through seed catalogs, trying to start your seeds, trying to get your garden space ready. So I think that's a really great option, and honestly, that's my backup plan. If these seedlings fail, that's where I'll be going, and there's a couple varieties that I only need like 1 or 2 plants of, so I plan on just purchasing those local as well.
Okay, so I have some tips. So I'm sure by now you are overwhelmed and wondering this is something that you can't do, but I encourage everyone you can. It will just take some time and discipline, and overall the reward is going to be those fresh fruits and vegetables that you're going to have to feed your family. So we're going to talk about this a little bit later on too, but these are some tips to be thinking about when it comes to your garden. So once you have your plants in the ground, I have some helpful tips that's going to help your garden be even more successful. Try placing mulch around the plants. This will help block out the sun and prevent weeds from growing. So less weeding for you and healthier plants, one of those win-win situations. Try planting pollinator plants around your garden. This one is often overlooked. Pollinators are so important to us, and by planting plants around your garden, you'll attract more pollinators, which will help your garden be overall more successful. We've been doing some research on how this is helping yields in farmers' fields by planting pollinator plants around their fields. And then some plant pest control flowers. Yes, there are some plants that can help keep pests away. It's true, by adding some of these, you'll be able to fight off some of those pests without having to use harmful chemicals or traps or things like that. So
something else to think about when planting your garden is to plant some plants that can attract pollinators, so bees, butterflies, those kinds of things. So we're just going to talk about this real quick, and it'll come up in another episode. But these dead plants are pollinator plants that I bought from Soil and Water last year. There was like purple cone flowers of different varieties that are native to this area, but also help to attract pollinators. So if you want to do some pots in your garden with different flowers, marigolds are really good. They also help deter rabbits. That's what my grandpa always told me. And we'll also talk about a couple different varieties that are really good companion plants to help keep pests away, but also attract the good bees and bugs that we need to pollinate our plants.
Okay, so that is basically the first part of our basics on gardening. I know it's a lot of information, and you're probably wondering where you need to start. So just follow those 6 steps that I gave you, and you're going to do great. And just remember, like, if you stay tuned, we have plans, so we're going to definitely be able to walk you through the whole process. There's going to be lots of videos coming your way, and lots of instructional information and things like that. And if you ever feel like you're having any questions, or you're stumped on something, you can always call us. We are happy to help you get started with whatever way we can. So stay tuned, and I'll see you guys next time.